Welcome to Seniors in Focus, a podcast presented by the Senior Services Society of British Columbia. Each month, we're going to shine a light on issues that matter to today's seniors, whether you're a senior yourself or a caregiver, a family member, or simply somebody who cares. This podcast is a place for thoughtful conversations, expert insights, and practical tools to help you navigate aging with dignity and support. I'm your host, Carolyn Jack, and since this is our inaugural episode, I thought I'd take a moment to introduce myself. First, I am, as of about 6 months ago, a senior. So I'm thinking about and trying to plan for a lot of the issues that we're going to be talking about on this show. I was also the primary caregiver for my elderly parents in the final years of their lives, and that was an extremely eye-opening experience for me. I'm a daughter of two immigrant parents, so I grew up without having grandparents around and without a lot of window in on the nature of aging and the elderly. And so when I started out caring for my parents, what I didn't know about aging could have filled BC Stadium. But I learned, and I learned fast, about health issues, about housing issues, transportation issues, and financial issues that are special to the elderly and seniors. Today, we're launching the show with a conversation about financial fraud and seniors. And I'm joined by Sean McGuire, who is a branch manager at Coast Capital Savings. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited.
Thank you for coming on. Now, let's set the table a little bit. How big of a problem is financial fraud with seniors?
Unfortunately, it's starting to become a really big problem, and it's running rampant. And fortunately, now there's going to be a little bit more eyes on this. But through my tenure at the banks, it's beginning to be somewhat smaller, and it's just been growing in scale over especially in the last 5 years.
I know that financial fraud is a bit of a moving beast. It changes all the time. What are you seeing today in terms of how financial fraud is being committed? What are the things that are a trend, if you will, out there?
Yeah, there's all sorts of fraud that's going on out there. I would say the biggest ones that we see typically at the bank, especially among seniors, would be the investment scams or the get rich quick, more so relating to the line of crypto or like quick return investment kind of aspect. The second one we do see a lot of the time is romance scams. And this is, again, uh, unfortunately, it takes advantage of seniors who may not have that partner in their life anymore. And so these scammers like to impersonate people and pretend to care. And it's really sad. And, it's very rampant as well. And I would say the next two are kind of hand in hand. Bank impersonators, so actually people calling over the phone pretending that they're from the bank looking to investigate the bank. And then the last one would be like tech support, calling in to help fix a problem, and they cause just an even worse problem.
Do you have any examples of stories that you know of that have happened to a senior at your branch or
Yeah,
bank?
sadly, too many. But I can definitely go into a little bit of detail about what is more recent within the last year or so. This would have been a bank impersonation scams. I had a client who had come in to take out a large sum of cash. Very secretive, very discreet. Wanted to take out like at the excess of $20,000, and so that's always a red flag because in this modern day and time, like not a lot of businesses, not a lot of people take cash these days. And so, fortunately enough, that this was brought to my attention, and I actually had called them into the room and asked a lot more questions, and who is this money going to, why is it this. There's a lot of prying on my end, but for good intentions. All of a sudden the client asked if they could just put their phone over in another room really quickly, and so I was quite shocked, and another red flag about that. And so after they put the phone away, they relayed to me that there was somebody on the bank from the other side saying that we shouldn't talk to the tellers and we shouldn't talk to the manager. They are going to ask you questions. And we need to do an investigation on both the manager and the tellers to make sure they're doing their jobs correctly.
Wow.
So you just make sure you take that out. So it was really sad. We actually stopped it. They're quite shooken up after as well. But at the end of the day, we were able to save them about $20,000, which I learned later that they were going to go put into a box and send it to gosh knows where.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, thank heavens that you had the knowledge and awareness and that you were able to stop that.
Yeah.
Is that something that people can, kind of count on their bank branch to know to do? Is that common practice amongst?
I think it is now. And, like we'll do everything in our power to make sure that we know. And like, I think it's tough because we will also want to make sure that we have privacy between the clients and what they do, because at the end of the day, yes, it is their money, but it's also our job to make sure that we protect their money and have a fiduciary duty. So it can raise, tensions. There can be slight conflict when we're asking, hey, do you know this person that you're going to? And, majority of the time people will know, and it's for valid reasons. But for that 1 out of every 10 times that we can catch somebody who's shipping it into a Bitcoin machine to buy money in Bitcoin and send it overseas, or looking to buy a bunch of gift cards with cash and then give it to these people over the phone. Like, that's why we ask those questions. And so, yeah, it raises a lot of tensions sometimes, but we're doing it for the best interest of our clients, our members, and especially the seniors too, because they're highly, highly vulnerable.
You just mentioned Bitcoin. I want to
Yeah.
dive into that a little bit. Is that something that you're seeing? Is there fraud happening with cryptocurrency? How do seniors? I would imagine that seniors would be confused by a conversation about Bitcoin. What's happening there?
To be frank, I think I can get confused about conversations around Bitcoin sometimes. So I can only imagine somebody from the outside looking in. I can empathize. Like, all we see in the news and the media is, Bitcoin is at an all-time high. Bitcoin is going to do this, and there's just lots of FOMO that is almost happening for these people. And so, you know, when these people are trying to get in on this trend, it's either they're Googling it and there's promoted links, and unfortunately, some of these promoted links you can pay for as a regular day person, and so you can promote your website that might not be necessarily intended for what it is, and so people will click on the number one promoted link at the top, and then they'll be able to go down, and then all of a sudden somebody will contact them, tell them this is how you do it. They'll actually get them to put in typically smaller amounts of money at the time, and then all of a sudden that 2,000 turns into 5,000, or that 5,000 turns into 10,000 within a day or so. And then they go try to actually withdraw the funds, or they want to try to add more. So that's like where it's that instant gratification of, hey, I just grew my money 2 times in the span of a week. Let's either go put some more in, or let's take our gains out. And so when they try to take their gains out, what'll actually happen is these customers are required to pay more for tax purposes to be able to take it out. And so that's how the scammers will receive more money. Or the second part is that they'll just put more money in, and it'll get funded into this account and it'll grow. And so it's almost like a Ponzi scheme, but without the payout option.
And is this happening online? Is this happening by phone? How is this taking place?
Everywhere, everywhere. So I mean, the primary contact, or the way that these scammers do get contact information, is unfortunately there's a big black market out there where if you fall for these scams once, your phone number, your name will get circulated around for other scammers to buy. Second of all, if you sign up for these websites that are on Google that aren't necessarily legitimate, you've given them your first, last name, contact, email, and phone number, and you're scheduled for a call within the next 24 hours to 48 hours. So that's mainly how they're getting it out there. And then it's just continuing to, unfortunately, build that trust between the scammer and who's being scammed at that point.
Notice in the recent federal budget there was mention of a code of conduct for banks related to economic fraud. What can you tell me about that? What is it that's coming down the pipe?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's not necessarily 100% set in stone. From my interpretation of it, there's going to be the first national anti-fraud strategy. So it's a whole government plan to tackle fraud across Canada. So this will be more of like a two-parter, where number one, they're going to be holding banks to a higher standard. And so that comes to legislative, what we're reporting to the government in terms of the scams that are going on. And then also, they're going to be making sure that banks are being able to get required express consent before giving account holders certain capabilities, such as like transfers, payment, bill features, e-transfers, and so forth.
What does express consent mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would need to make sure that we ask for consent to be able to set this up. So let's just say, somebody had come in to open a bank account. From my interpretation of this, and it's early stages, so I can't speak for, Coast or what other institutions are going to do. But generally speaking, if you were to come and open up a bank account, it would look like we would need to ask you as the member, or you as the client, to be able to say, do we have consent to be able to set up online e-transfers? And then subsequently, I believe it'll stem out for certain amounts to be able to have more of like a safe catch or a safe switch. Carol, do we get consent to be able to put your e-transfer limits on? And then continually, are we able to actually have that limit at 3,000? And you have to say yes. And that's kind of, interesting as well, where we can kind of run into some hiccups because a lot of people use e-transfers or a lot of people pay their bills online. And so how does that catch on, or how does that become a thing? That's just one of the pieces that is going to take some strong thinking to be able to find ways to stop these fraud procedures. Yeah, that's the kind of what my knowledge is of what the federal budget and their announcement and what they're trying to do towards battling fraud.
So people should expect they're probably going to get some more information both from government and I imagine their banks coming up soon to explain whatever those regulations evolve to become.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about how to take care of this. We've kind of told people a whole lot about the problem. I imagine people listening out there are going to be wondering a bit about solutions. So let's dive into that. What are, say, the top 5 best practices? What do you think people should be doing to try and bulletproof themselves from this kind of fraud?
Yeah, I think, when you asked this question, it was really tough for me to narrow down 5 to, quote unquote, bulletproof yourself. I think the biggest thing is, number one, don't be embarrassed about finances. You think there's this stigma around um, personal finance as we're growing up to, make sure people don't know what you have. And find somebody in your life, that can help you. And fortunately for some, they have family members that can be able to do that, or good friends to take care and look after some things and to bounce ideas off of, hey, this is what so and so said to me, and they're going to give me crypto and I'm going to do this. And so, being able to have that what would be the best word for this, that transparency between you and your loved ones. And, it doesn't have to be embarrassing, and it shouldn't be. Everybody works hard for the money that they have, and we should all also be working hard to protect the money that we have as well. So I'd say that would be number one is, finding somebody reliable that you can count on. This can be also set up in a couple different ways. If you're looking at powers of attorney, you can also look into commonteeship. There's different programs out there from public guardian trustee, but you have to take the first step and be able to have that conversation. And then secondly, make sure you understand what you're getting into as well for those pieces. So that would be number one, have conversations. I would say number two, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And I know that's very cliche, but there's not a lot of people out there that are going to be able to 2 times, 3 times your money. So if you're hearing that, um, this investment advisor made me, 10 times my money in a week, it just doesn't happen in these days and ages. So be very careful, around people soliciting these business opportunities to you. Number 3 would be make sure you get your computer checked and have strong antiviruses, and make sure you change up your passwords every 6 months. And so that also would protect your computer from malicious attacks where these scammers tend to go in and then can potentially install some things to view your screens, to look at your passwords, to look at your bank accounts. And then subsequently, by keeping your password changed and strong, there's a lot less likely of a chance that you can get hacked with those passwords as well. And I would say those are like really the bulletproof things that can stop a lot of fraud going on.
I'm wondering, I had a family experience with this. In fact, it's probably the way that I realized that my parents were getting elderly. My dad had always taken care of all aspects of finance in my parents' family. They lived in an area that has a lot of seniors, and consequently, that particular neighborhood has a tendency to get hit with a lot of scam phone calls, right?
Mhm.
They know where the seniors live. And what happened was somebody called my father and said that his grandson was in jail and needed $5,000 immediately to get him out. One of the things in what you're describing, it's that kind of, going after avarice, I guess,
Mm.
in people to scam them. But there's also the part where they will try to scare you, the emotional pull part. My dad, who had been a very sober-minded, rather thrifty Scot for 88 years at that point, was in a panic. And of course, he began giving information to that person on the phone.
Mhm.
Gave them the name of his grandson. Ryan, is it Ryan? Because Ryan was traveling at the time. That kind of thing. Yes, it's Ryan, that sort of thing. What happened, thank heavens, was my mother could overhear my dad in this conversation. My dad actually got in the car and went off to get the
Mhm.
$5,000. And my mother phoned me and said, "So your dad just had a call, and told me about it." And I immediately jumped in a car and went to the house. to prevent him from taking money anywhere to anybody. It turned into a whole bit of a process because, in fact, what the scammers had asked him to do was to get Petrocan
Gift
coupons
cards.
instead of actually cash. So that meant that I ended up having to have a whole conversation with Petrocan about my 88-year-old father getting $5,000 worth of gas coupons from them and how they were going to be reimbursing him.
Yeah,
But I think that one of the really important things to let people know is that, I think a lot of the stories are where they are going to go after some emotional pull. Is that your experience at the bank?
100%. Whatever emotion it may be, where it's, that instant gratification we talked about,
Fear.
the
Yeah.
fear, the loneliness, like I think scams only work when you play with emotions because we're human at the end of
Yeah.
the day, right? So it's an emotional time. And when we get caught up in our emotions, we tend to maybe think a little bit less rationally. And that's where we can kind of get caught up in specific scenarios where, we would think that we would never catch ourselves doing. All right. So I think you're 100% hit the nail on the head. Like these people play off of emotions. And I would
Well,
say honestly, they're really, really good at it. And so
yeah.
um they mastered it and they perfected the art of it.
And I think the other aspect to it is high pressure. They need that money now.
Hmm.
They need it in 2 hours. So it's some kind of high emotion ask where you have to get like they're trying to make it so you don't have time to talk to anybody.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I would say, like, from my experience, that those are two things I would watch out for. The minute somebody is saying, I need it right away.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Well, I want to thank you so much for the words of wisdom that you've given us today. So that was Sean McGuire of Coast Capital Savings. Thank you, Sean, for joining us. For everyone else, if you want to find out more, if you're worried and you want to get some more information about how to protect yourself from these kinds of frauds and issues, there are resources out there designed specifically for seniors to help prevent and address fraud. The Competition Bureau, the RCMP, and the Canadian Association of Bankers all have toolkits that you can get for free. Check our website, sssbc.ca, and we'll have some links there for you that you can download. That is our show for today. Episode 1 is in the can. Thank you again, Sean. And we hope you'll join us again in a month's time. Thank you for listening. I'm Carolyn Jack.